HP made a Linux notebook. Whoa! Hello again everyone, and welcome back to LearnLinuxTV. In today's video, I'm going to review the Dev 1 from HP. And this video actually marks the very first time that I've ever reviewed an HP product on this channel. And this occasion is very special because this is a Linux notebook, so actually I kind of feel like I'm reviewing a piece of history. And this is not the first time that a big name manufacturer has ever put out a Linux notebook. I mean, this has happened several times before, but the thing is, most of the time, those notebooks produced by those manufacturers, they all ship Ubuntu. And more recently, Fedora as well. But actually, on this unit right here, we have, surprisingly, get this, Pop! OS. When you put this all together, I'm actually reviewing the very first Linux notebook from HP, which is a huge thing in and of itself, but also the very first notebook from a company other than System76 to ship Pop! OS. So there's quite a bit to unpack here. Speaking of unpacking, when the box did arrive at the studio, I was so busy that I actually forgot that it was on its way, so it took me a minute to remember what was inside the box. Is this the toaster that I ordered? Well, it's too big of a box for that. Maybe somebody gifted me a huge box of Milk Duds? Well, it's probably not that either. Huh. Well, I guess there's only one way to find out. Wow. Awesome. So yeah, inside the box was not only this notebook right here, but also the launch keyboard and the Creator mouse, which was a pleasant surprise as well, which we'll definitely be talking about later. Now, before we get into the actual review, I just want to mention first and foremost that neither HP or System76 has sponsored this content. In fact, neither of them were allowed to see this video before I showed it to you guys, even though they didn't ask to see it anyway. I think they know my policy by now, which also includes the fact that anyone that sends me anything for review, they do so at their own risk, because I will always give you guys my unbiased opinion. But you know who actually sponsored this video? Well, Linode. And you know what? With Linode as the sponsor for today's video, there's definitely no conflict of interest here because they don't even make computers. But what they do provide is an easy-to-use platform you can use to spin up your very own Linux server. And what the heck would you need a Linux server for, you might ask? Well, literally anything you could think of. You could set up a blog, a Minecraft server, or use one of their many available distributions to follow along with the tutorials on LearnLinuxTV. And when it comes to notebooks, if you're out and about, you might actually benefit from a VPN server. And that's a way that you could take control right into your own hands, especially considering that more and more VPN providers are caught logging things that they promised they weren't logging. And when it comes to building your own VPN server on Linode, you could literally send all of your logs to dev null. And that's just one example. The possibilities are endless. And if you check out their platform using the URL that you see on the screen right now, you'll actually receive $100 in free credit towards your new account that's good for up to 60 days that you can use to get into all kinds of Linux server shenanigans. So thanks again to Linode for their continued support of LearnLinuxTV. I really appreciate it. And let's dive into the review. But first of all, if you're like me, the name Dev 1 might sound familiar for some reason, and maybe you can't figure out why. It actually took me a while to figure out why that sounded so familiar, and here's the answer. I know, right? It took me a long time too. Anyway, what I like to do with pretty much all of my notebook reviews is start off with a look at the hardware itself. Specifically, let's take a look at the build quality. My first impression of the Dev 1 is that it's a bit heavier than most 14-inch notebooks released nowadays, and it still feels lightweight, so I'm not saying that it's overly heavy, but you will notice that it does have an extra heft to it. And this is a good thing, actually. The extra heft is due to how solid it feels. It literally feels like the most solid Linux notebook that I've reviewed lately on this channel, even more so than offerings from System76 themselves. And yes, I'm serious. The HP Dev 1 looks and feels like a premium notebook throughout because, well, that's actually what it is. It was made by HP. I can't believe I'm saying that. It's probably going to take me a while to get over that. One of my favorite things about this notebook is actually the keyboard, which is officially my favorite keyboard of any notebook that I've ever reviewed in the history of this channel. And it's actually to the point where, in my opinion, it's actually ThinkPad level. And before anyone writes in and yells at me, I'm talking about ThinkPad level in terms of their current models, not the older ThinkPad models that many people freak out about, like the classic ThinkPads, for example. But the keyboard is actually really, really good. I love it. Anyway, enough glossing over the keyboard, and let's talk about the port selection. I find the available ports to be decent, but not life-changing. There's just enough when it comes to ports. It doesn't go above and beyond, but it does have what's necessary. We have an HDMI port, 2 USB-C ports, 2 USB-A ports, a combo audio jack for input and output, as well as a barrel connector for power. So, pretty much the standard stuff. Now, I would have loved to see an Ethernet jack because many customers in their target market actually configure switches and other network devices as part of their job. But then again, it's not the end of the world. You could carry a dongle with you if you need to. Just don't forget it at the office if you're on your way to help a client. Now, the trackpad is also really nice. Not only does it have clickable edges at the bottom left and the bottom right corners, but there's also physical buttons at the top of the trackpad that you can use as well. And that's especially great if you prefer to use the nub at the center of the keyboard as your input device. And I would say that the trackpad ranks up there with the best of the other models that I've reviewed recently, and it's pretty good. The display is also really good. It's very bright, and HP claims that it's the brightest panel of any notebook in their portfolio today, which is a bold claim, but it is definitely bright. And what can I say? I really like the screen a lot. Now, when you take brightness out of the equation, the specs are a bit standard. We have a 1080p panel at 60 Hz, but like I mentioned, it does look really good. The quality is great, and having a resolution of 1080p on a notebook is my preferred resolution anyway, so it works for me. So all in all, I would say that the build quality of this device, it just looks and feels great. It's very sturdy, like I mentioned earlier, and it feels like a premium product. Well, it is a premium product. And I can't believe, and I'm saying this again, that I'm holding an HP notebook that not only ships with a Linux distro, but Pop! OS. I mean, what universe are we in? Anyway, another thing that I wanted to mention real quick is the audio quality. It's something that people ask me about anytime that I review notebooks, so I'm trying not to forget to mention that. Now, on the Dev 1, the speakers are loud. I mean, really loud. Probably the loudest of any notebook that I remember reviewing. I mean, when I crank up the vocals or a music track or something like that, the audio doesn't distort. It handles everything well, and it's just so loud that I found myself having to turn it down when I got to the max volume because I felt like if I kept going, it was going to hurt my ears, which is interesting. And the audio quality is really good. I would say a 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10 or something like that. It definitely sounds better than most of the notebooks that I've reviewed. And, well, I can't really complain about the speakers. I think they're fine. Anyway, we need to talk about the operating system, which is no stranger to my channel, Pop! OS. You'd be totally forgiven if you assumed, if you heard about this notebook on the news or something like that, that it probably ships with Ubuntu. And that does seem to be the case most of the time. But here we have Pop! OS. And Pop! OS is integrated very well on this notebook. But then again, Pop! OS works well on just about any notebook that has supported hardware. And I feel like here we have a really great fit for developers when it comes to the quality of this computer itself and also the quality of the distribution, so you'd almost think like they're made for each other. Now, as an aside, I really hope that the release of this notebook right here puts to rest the false claim that Pop! OS is only for System 76 machines. I mean, I get that comment constantly, and I'm not really sure where that came from. I mean, that's literally never been the case. With this computer right here, I think it finally proves once and for all that Pop! OS is not specifically for System 76 machines, and we have it here on the HP. So I think it's safe to say the myth has been busted. With the implementation of Pop! OS on the HP Dev 1, you have all of the features that you'd expect in a notebook designed by a company like HP, including built-in system recovery. But then again, built-in system recovery is not actually new to Pop! OS. It's had that feature for a very long time. Now that I think about it, I almost wonder if features like having a recovery partition here on Pop! OS is one of the reasons why HP chose it. Well, that's just a guess on my end. I have no idea what went into that decision, for them to work together. But it works really well, this distribution and the hardware, so you'd almost think like they're made for each other. Anyway, when you first power on the device, you'll see the same welcome screens that you may have seen before if you've already used Pop! OS, but there are some slight differences. The differences include an end-user license agreement, which you'd expect from bigger manufacturers anyway, and also a different wallpaper than what Pop! OS normally ships with. On a personal note, I think the wallpaper was a bad choice here because it looks way too bright. I think that they're trying to show off how bright the display is on this model, which I could totally understand. However, the wallpaper shouldn't be brighter than the application windows in my opinion, but you can always change the wallpaper anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. Actually, it's not a big deal. But what's interesting here is that the HP build of Pop! OS doesn't even have the same wallpapers available as the main release does, so I don't really know what to say about that. I don't really care about it necessarily, but I just found that to be a bit interesting, so I figured I'd mention it. Now, let's move on to other aspects that are worth mentioning, and are actually probably more exciting. And one of those is how HP pushes out firmware updates to this device. And the way they're doing this is the right way to do this. So much so that they're actually using Linux-compatible methods to push out firmware updates. And that's really important. They even went on record to point out that the reason why they're using LVFS to push out firmware updates is because they want to eliminate the need for a Windows partition just for the ability to install updates to the firmware. And I'm not even kidding, they actually called that out as the reason why they're using LVFS for firmware. And it's actually very surprising to me that a manufacturer such as HP is actually acknowledging the fact that we Linux users have had a very hard time updating firmware in the past, and they decided to go with a technology that would help eliminate that problem. That's awesome. But they didn't stop there. They actually customized Pop! OS a bit further to ensure that when you click on the Support tab and you fill out a ticket, it will literally log the ticket with HP directly, and they also claim that their support staff has been given Pop! OS specific training to help with those tickets. Now that is doing it right. Now let's sidetrack a bit and talk about the specs. This notebook features an AMD CPU, which is very popular with the Linux crowd for sure, and with good reason. AMD makes some awesome CPUs. Specifically, the HP Dev 1 features the Ryzen 7 Pro 5850U, which has 8 physical cores and 16 threads. When it comes to memory, the Dev 1 ships with 16 gigabytes of RAM, which is pretty cool, but what's even cooler is that you can upgrade that to up to 64 gigabytes. No, I wasn't meaning that you can go and, configure this unit to have more when they build it for you and they ship it to you. And I'm actually talking about HP's words here. They claim that this unit has 64 gigabytes of user upgradable memory. Now, I can't remember the last time that I heard a notebook manufacturer claim that didn't already ship Linux, so I think they actually get it. But there is one thing that's missing here that's a bit of a concern to me, and that's the lack of Thunderbolt support. The Dev 1 not having Thunderbolt support isn't really all that surprising. I mean, anytime you have an AMD CPU on a notebook, I pretty much actually just assume that Thunderbolt is missing, and I'm usually right. And the reason for that is because there's some politics at play between Intel and AMD that I won't get into. So that is a bummer in my opinion, but then again, I don't feel it's HP's fault because they didn't ask for those politics. That's just the nature of the industry right now. Everything is moving over to USB 4. I won't get into that. So I guess we're in a bit of a transitionary period right now, but if you wanted to use something like a, external GPU dock, that might be of a concern to you, but if that's not something that you're trying to do, then, well, maybe the lack of Thunderbolt support won't matter to you. But I want to be clear, the lack of Thunderbolt support does not in any way impact your ability to use a docking station. You can absolutely do that. In fact, I did have a chance to try that out, and it works fine. On my end, I tried the Pine docking deck, and it worked without any issues at all. I connected a keyboard, mouse, and display to that dock, and it worked very well. I even went ahead and attached a USB-C charger to the dock, and, well, power delivery was actually able to charge the notebook, so even though we might not have Thunderbolt, we can absolutely use a docking station. Now, considering that this is YouTube, you have to show more than just a dock. So what you're seeing right here is me testing out a docking station, but what can I do to bring this to the next level? Ooh, I know. How about adding blast processing to the mix? Now that's playing with power. Now near the beginning of the video, I showed a quick unboxing, and what I found inside the box was a few more things that I didn't expect, namely the launch keyboard and the HP Creator mouse, which was a pleasant surprise. But why are they including those things in the box? And if you were to buy one, would you also get those things? Well, no, unfortunately. The individuals that were chosen to review this particular notebook were provided a launch keyboard and a mouse as well. And I think the reason for that is to underscore the fact that this is a notebook that's intended for developers. Now, I've already reviewed the launch keyboard on this channel already, so rather than repeat myself, I'll just leave a card for that video right about here. But in case you're curious, I am still using the launch keyboard to this day ever since that review was done. It's never left my desk. So I absolutely love that keyboard. You've probably seen it in the background of many videos on my channel. So again, I'm not going to repeat myself here about that keyboard. Just go ahead and watch that review if you haven't already seen it to learn more about the launch keyboard. But anyway, what was up with that mouse? I mean, why did they include a mouse with a notebook review unit? Well, actually, there's a very good reason for that. The Creator mouse actually does have a Linux-specific feature that is really awesome. The thing is, you can customize the buttons on this mouse, which may not excite too many of you because, I mean, a lot of mice actually give you the ability to customize the buttons, but you can actually configure this mouse with a Linux app that's dedicated for the purpose. So what does that mean? Well, you actually won't be embarrassed as you ask your colleague there at work that has a Windows machine if you can, I don't know, plug your mouse into their computer to download a tool to customize the mouse, and then have to answer questions about why your operating system doesn't let you do that and you have to use theirs. So thankfully you can avoid that awkward conversation because the Mouse Configurator app is available right on the Pop Shop. So yeah, the fact that we can configure a mouse via Linux, or Linux was considered a first-class citizen to receive this app, that was really cool. The target audience for this particular notebook is developers, administrators, and so on. So I'm not going to show you gaming performance here since this isn't a gaming notebook. There's no dedicated GPU, so I guess that means you won't be running, Cyberpunk 2077 on the highest settings or anything like that. But that's not really the designated purpose for this notebook. Again, if you're a system administrator, maybe you work in DevOps, you're writing code, you're an engineer, those are the types of people that this notebook is geared toward, and actually, it fits that use case extremely well. Okay, so how much does it cost? Well, the price is $1,099 at this time, and there's even a dedicated website available for this product. And HP actually says that they made a separate website for this product, so that way Linux fans wouldn't have to comb through a bunch of Windows machines to find this one. They figured if they gave it a dedicated website, there'd be no way you could miss it. You just go to that one website, and right there it is. There's no searching. There's no scrolling through an endless number of devices. It's just this one website. You go there, that's it. It's that simple. And like I mentioned, the price is $1,099, which I think is absolutely a great price for a premium computer just like this. The only downside is that they don't currently ship internationally, so if you do want a Dev 1, well, you have to make your order from the United States. But hopefully at some point in the future, maybe they'll open that up to other areas around the world, and I hope that they do. When they were asked about this, they just told us that they didn't have an answer for that quite yet, but they didn't say no, they didn't say yes. So you know what, just keep your eyes on their news pages, and if it comes out for your country, then I absolutely recommend it. So what's my verdict on the HP Dev 1? Should you buy it? Is it good? Is it worth your money? Well, absolutely. And actually, and this might surprise some of you, but if you are looking for a 14-inch Linux notebook and you're not specifically looking for a, gaming notebook, but something to be your daily driver to get work done, then this is the one right here that I recommend. There's nothing that even comes close. Nothing from System 76 or Tuxedo even comes close to this computer. And that's surprising me too. Yeah, I know, right? But that's true. I love System 76. I love Tuxedo. I have computers from both of them, and I use them daily. But if you are looking for a 14-inch notebook, specifically one that's not made for gaming, it's this one. I feel like HP has knocked the 14-inch Linux notebook so far out of the park that it's going to be really hard for other manufacturers to catch up at this point, because this is almost like the masterclass of how to make a Linux notebook. I was absolutely shocked by this. I was expecting, something half-baked, right? I mean, you have a typical Linux notebook manufacturer that's not one of the Linux-focused companies like System76 or Tuxedo. They decide to come out with a Linux notebook. You have to search their site for it. You just go to the search bar. You spend like 5 or 10 minutes looking for it. You still can't find it. So you go to Google, you search there, you find some blog that somebody wrote, and they have a link. You click on that link, and then you buy it. They even have a dedicated actual website for this model, which is amazing. They thought of everything. So again, if you are looking for a 14-inch Linux notebook, definitely go with this one. I highly recommend it, and you won't regret it. So let me know what you guys thought about my review or this computer in general down in the comments below. I'm very curious to hear what you guys have to say. And make sure you subscribe if you haven't already done so, because I have some awesome content coming very soon. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next video.